You paid for your carrier bag. That was the thing that told you everything. Every other supermarket gave them away, smiled as they packed your shopping, made you feel like a valued customer. Kwik Save charged you, and somehow that was the point. That little charge, that slight indignity, was proof that every penny they saved on the unnecessary was a penny knocked off your bill. Millions of us understood that deal without anyone explaining it. We kept coming back. We kept the bags for years, stuffed in a kitchen drawer because we'd paid for them and we weren't going to throw something away that had cost money. There's a whole generation of British households that had a drawer full of Kwik Save bags. Some people are selling them on eBay now for £20 a piece, which tells you something about what the place meant. Albert Goubet was a Welsh entrepreneur from Prestatyn, with a gift for spotting what people actually needed, rather than what businesses assumed they wanted. In 1959, he opened a small grocery shop on Queen Street in Rhyl. Not glamorous, not ambitious looking, just a shop selling food at prices that made sense to the people walking past. He called the company Value Foods, which told you precisely what it was about and nothing else. No tagline, no promise of an experience. Just the word value in plain letters because that was the entire offer. He was already running market stalls by then, already understood the rhythm of selling to people who counted their change. The grocery shop followed naturally. Then a second shop in Wrexham. Then Chester. Small, careful steps, nothing flashy. The kind of expansion that doesn't get written about in business magazines because it doesn't make a good story until it does. The idea that changed everything came from a trip to America in 1964. Goubet saw discount retailing done properly for the first time. A limited range of brand name products, no frills, no theatre, just low prices achieved through low overheads and high turnover. He came home and opened the first Kwik Save discount store in Colwyn Bay in 1965. Nobody in Britain had seen anything quite like it. The model was specific. Stock between 400 and 600 lines, all branded goods, people already trusted, buy them in bulk on favourable payment terms, sell them before the payment was due, use the cash flow to run the business. It was almost mathematical in its elegance. Within 2 years, there were 13 stores across North Wales and Cheshire. People who had never been able to afford their weekly shop at the big supermarkets suddenly could. That was the beginning. Walking into a Kwik Save in the 1970s or early 1980s felt different from anywhere else, and it felt different from the moment you stepped through the door. The shelves were wooden warehouse racking, the kind you'd find in a stockroom rather than a shop floor, and goods sat in their manufacturer's cardboard boxes, half open so you could reach in and take what you needed. There were no individual price tags on items. Staff memorized the prices, all 400 to 600 lines, and at the checkout they'd scan through your basket without hesitating, calling out figures from memory while the queue behind you shuffled forward. They didn't look anything up, they just knew. Goods were stacked high, aisles were narrow, lighting was functional rather than flattering. Nobody was trying to make you linger. The whole design said, get what you came for and go, and because you've done that quickly, we've spent less running this place. And because we've spent less running this place, your bread costs less. It was honest in the way that very few shops managed to be honest. The transaction was clear. You weren't paying for atmosphere. Many stores had a liquor save section tucked to one side. Wines and spirits at the same no-nonsense prices as everything else. Bottles of wine that cost less than you thought wine was allowed to cost. Cans of beer in bulk. The kind of pricing that made you do a quick calculation and buy more than you'd planned because the maths made sense. The butchery counter was run by a local franchise called Coleman's, which meant the man behind the counter often knew the customers by name, knew what cut you always asked for, knew your mother preferred something with a bit more fat on it. He'd been there since the place opened. He knew everyone's order before they reached the front of the queue. And yes, you paid for your carrier bag. A few pence. Every time. It wasn't a punishment, it was a statement of intent. The money you saved on bags went toward the price of your shopping. Every unnecessary cost that could be stripped away was stripped away, and the result arrived in your basket in the form of branded products at prices that felt almost illicit. People brought their own bags, or they bought new ones and kept them, because spending money on something you'd throw away felt wasteful in a way Kwik Save made you understand. For working-class Britain, Kwik Save wasn't just convenient. It had a kind of dignity to it that's easy to miss if you weren't there. It treated people on tight budgets as though their money was worth exactly as much as anyone else's. No fake warmth, no loyalty card theatre, no music piped through speakers to make you feel better about spending more than you meant to. Just decent branded goods at prices that didn't require calculation before you put them in the basket. You could do your whole weekly shop and know, walking in, roughly what it was going to cost. Not roughly, almost exactly, because the prices didn't change week to week the way offer-driven supermarkets' prices changed. Kwik Save's prices were just the prices. That was the deal. By the time Kwik Save floated on the London Stock Exchange in 1970, the model was proven beyond any reasonable doubt. Through the 1970s and 1980s, the store count climbed steadily. 200 stores, then 400, then past 600, then approaching 900. At its peak, the company sat in the FTSE 100, a blue-chip British business built on wooden shelves and staff who could tell you the price of a tin of beans without looking. The city took it seriously. Analysts wrote about it. Institutional investors held its shares. It was, for a while, one of the most quietly remarkable retail success stories in British business history. The checkout operators became a particular kind of institution. They didn't have scanners in the early years. They knew the prices and punched them in. Regular customers would watch them work the way you'd watch someone genuinely skilled at something, the quick hands, the running total announced before you'd finished unloading. You trusted them in a way that's harder to explain now, when every price is scanned and displayed and verified automatically. They just knew. And knowing mattered. There was a woman at the Kwik Save on the high street in dozens of towns across Britain who had been working that checkout since the store opened, who knew the name of every regular customer, who could spot when someone's basket was different from usual and ask if everything was all right. That's not a romanticized version of what it was. That was just what it was. The weekly shop at Kwik Save was a ritual for millions of families through those decades. Mothers who knew exactly how far the money had to stretch, who had worked out by trial and error which day the bread was freshest and which aisle to avoid if you were in a hurry. Pensioners who had been shopping there since the 1970s and saw no reason to go anywhere else. Students in their first flat loading up on branded goods at prices that left something in the account for the rest of the week. Families who did the big shop at Kwik Save and topped up at the corner shop when they ran out of something because Kwik Save's prices were so reliable that buying a bit extra made financial sense. The store didn't judge what you were buying or why. It just sold it to you at the price it said on the sign, and that consistency, year after year after year, built a loyalty that no marketing campaign could have manufactured. Albert Goubet sold his shares in 1973 and left the country. The official version was that he'd moved on to other ventures, which was true. He built further business interests in Ireland and New Zealand. But the departure was abrupt, and it created a crisis of confidence that briefly rattled the company. Customers didn't notice. The stores kept operating, the prices stayed low, the model held. But the man who had understood instinctively what Kwik Save was and who it was for had gone. What remained was a successful business that would spend the next 3 decades slowly forgetting the lesson he'd taught it. The 1990s arrived, and with them came the problems, arriving from several directions at once. Kwik Save acquired 117 ShopRite stores in 1994. Rapid expansion that looked like strength and turned out to be overreach. The stores were absorbed faster than the business could properly integrate them, and within 2 years, 107 underperforming stores had to be closed. A public admission that the growth had been too fast and too careless. The company that had built itself on discipline and restraint had, for a moment, abandoned both. Meanwhile, the competitive landscape was shifting in ways that nobody had anticipated when Kwik Save first opened in 1965. Aldi arrived in the UK in 1990, Lidl in 1994, Netto in 1990. European discounters who operated on exactly the same principles Kwik Save had built itself on, but with newer stores, cleaner designs, fresher own-brand products and continental supply chains that allowed them to undercut even Kwik Save's prices on certain lines. And then came the blow that arguably hurt most. Tesco launched its value range. Asda followed. Sainsbury's Basics arrived. The Big Four supermarkets, with their enormous buying power and their millions of loyal customers who already shopped there for everything else, began offering cheap branded alternatives that were cheap enough for the customers Kwik Save had always served. Kwik Save had invented the game. Now everyone else had learned to play it, and they had more money to play it with. In 1998, Summerfield bought Kwik Save for £1.3 billion. The plan, as plans often do, made sense on paper. Summerfield was a mid-market supermarket with cleaner stores and a wider range of products. Combining the two would create scale, shared supply chains, reduced costs, operational efficiencies. What the plan didn't account for was what Kwik Save actually was to the people who used it. Summerfield looked at those wooden shelves and decided they needed replacing. New fittings went in, designed more like an Asda or a modern Sainsbury's, brighter, more open, more aspirational looking. Fresh food sections were expanded, bakeries appeared in some stores, and prices crept up because running a nicer looking store costs more, and that cost has to come from somewhere. Kwik Save's customers noticed within weeks. These were people who had chosen Kwik Save precisely because they were paying close attention to prices. They compared. They remembered. They noticed when a tin that had cost a certain amount last week cost a few pence more this week. They didn't want a bakery section. They didn't want mood lighting. They didn't want checkered shirts. They wanted the prices to stay where they were. When the prices moved, the customers moved too, toward Aldi, toward Lidl, toward Iceland, toward wherever the same branded goods now cost less. The loyalty that had taken 40 years to build dissolved with surprising speed once the thing that had earned it was gone. Some of the refurbished stores were eventually converted back to the original format when it became clear the modernization wasn't working. The wooden shelves that had been ripped out were replaced with wooden shelves again. But the damage had been done and the window for recovery was closing faster than anyone at Summerfield seemed to understand. In 2006, Summerfield sold the Kwik Save brand and 171 stores to an investment vehicle for a refinancing package worth around £30 million. £30 million for what had once been a FTSE 100 company that had sold for £1.3 billion 8 years earlier. The new owners tried to stabilise things, more store closures, attempts to renegotiate supplier contracts, efforts to find further investment. By the end of 2006, the Sunday Times was reporting sharp falls in sales and mounting losses. In January 2007, suppliers began reporting delays in payment. Stock levels in core products started falling as suppliers held back deliveries. By May 2007, it was clear there was no way through. 79 stores closed overnight on 29th May. Staff arrived for their shifts and found the doors locked, notices in the windows. 22 more stores followed in June. At the end of June, remaining staff were told they couldn't be paid. The people who had worked those checkouts, who had memorized those prices, who had been there sometimes for 10 or 15 or 20 years, were told there was no money to pay their wages. On the 6th of July 2007, Kwik Save went into administration. The 56 stores that remained were sold to a company called Fresh Express. Fresh Express itself went into administration 8 months later in March 2008. The last stores closed quietly, without ceremony, in towns across Britain where the store had been a fixture for 3 or 4 decades. No farewell, no retrospective. The shutters came down, and that was that. In 2012, Costcutter relaunched the Kwik Save name as a discount fascia for independently owned convenience stores. The first new store opened in Bolton. It is not the same thing. It is a name on a sign above a shop that has nothing to do with what Kwik Save was. The name was worth something to someone, which is to say, it meant enough to people that putting it above a door might bring them in. That's a kind of tribute, even if it doesn't feel like one. What Kwik Save understood, and what the businesses that replaced it mostly don't, is that dignity and cheapness are not opposites. You could have both. You could walk into a store with very little money and leave with a full basket and your self-respect intact, without being made to feel like your budget was something to be managed or pitied or nudged upward. That wasn't a small thing. For millions of families across 4 decades of British life, it was the whole thing. The wooden shelves are gone. The checkout operators who knew every price from memory have retired or moved on. The Coleman's butcher counter is a memory. The liquor safe sign is long gone. You pay for your carrier bags everywhere now, but it doesn't feel the same because it isn't the same. Now it's a levy, a nudge, a policy. At Kwik Save, it was a philosophy. It meant they were on your side. It meant they thought your money was worth more than their convenience. Those carrier bags are on eBay for £20. People are buying them. Not because they're useful, because they remember what it felt like to shop somewhere that treated you like your budget was as valid as anyone else's. We didn't know back then how rare that was. We know now.